Well, welcome to this afternoon's session, and a star-studded session it is. My name is Tim Judah. I cover this region for The Economist, and I've been a journalist covering this region for a long time. And we're going to be listening to, 15 or 16 foreign ministers, deputy foreign ministers, and so on. And that's going to be, really quite important to hear what they have to say. But first of all, we're going to listen to a keynote address by Mr. Buya Osmani, who is, of course, Foreign Minister of North Macedonia and our host. So thank you very much, Mr. Osmani. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm sorry that I'm addressing you from here. I'm always confused what does a keynote speaker do in a panel, but I will try to just elaborate on some issues, and then I will join you in the panel to continue with discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends, welcome to Ohrid. As I said, would like to elaborate upon several topics which I believe would be a challenge to be discussed at such forum, but which I also believe would bring the best benefits from the conference. The first topic is, of course, linked to the topic of the session, and that is dialogue. Should you talk about the Balkans at any point in time, you will certainly identify dialogue as the missing critical component in any given political setting. The same applies no matter whether you talk about the Balkans at the beginning of the last century, or whether you talk about the Balkans by the end of 20th century, or whether you talk about present-day challenges to ensure the integration of future generations in the European and Euro-Atlantic structures where we do realistically belong. Representing a country pursuing an authentic model of internal and wider scope integration, I feel compelled to emphasize some of our own authentic, successful political projects, which in fact represents in a nutshell the essential purpose and message of this conference. One, this year we mark the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Ohrid Framework Agreement. Let's not forget the fact that this is a peace treaty, it's not just another cooperation agreement, and without any false modesty, I dare say it is probably the most successful peace treaty in the contemporary political history of the Balkans. Not only did this agreement stand the test of time and enabled North Macedonia to be growing and democratically maturing in peace and stability for 20 years now, but it also has served as an authentic model of internal integration and coexistence, which I can confidently say are unique not only for the Balkans, but could set an example for countries in the wider neighborhood. We call this model functional multi-ethnic democracy, and each of these words carries a profoundly important message. If coexistence, equality, freedom and solidarity are European values, then North Macedonia and Ohrid, symbolizing the framework agreement, are the best suited hub to promote, disseminate and foster these values in the Balkans. This brings me to the second topic of this session, and that's trust. Pursuing a dialogue without trust does not produce and does not deliver the desired results, even when the dialogue is seemingly successful. No matter how long we talk about our positive diplomatic approach, no matter how hard our efforts to emphasize at this conference only the favorable sides to the process of our political maturing, or if you like, we might even dim the lights in this hall, nothing of that will help us cover up the elephant very much present in this room, which is that the realistic picture of the relations between North Macedonia and Bulgaria, which shows us that those relations lack trust, regardless of the fact that we did have a successful dialogue which was crowned with a signed treaty in 2017. And I would like to be very precise with respect to this matter. This does not mean that the dialogue between the two neighboring countries resulted in a bad agreement. Quite the contrary. I do believe that the Treaty of Friendship sets an excellent framework to overcome differences. The treaty in its essence is remarkably simple. Discussions about issues which burden us are to be channeled through specialized commissions and through professional academic processes, while at the same time we enhance our cooperation and bring it to the highest level under the purview of the two governments. And I have thought long and hard why this treaty always prompts that bone of contention whenever mentioned, realizing that the root cause for this is the lack of trust. There is no treaty, no expert, lawyer, or political scientist that could have or draft provisions of a treaty, the success of which does not depend on the trust with which any treaty is to be supported. Thus, mutual trust is a must. These words echo across the text of these agreements and appear critical to their success. The Prespa Agreement, recognized as a problem-solving, reconciliatory model, is a product of mutual understanding, empathy, active dialogue, and above all, trust and confidence. Without mutual confidence, all efforts would have been futile. The logic for this is self-evident. Confidence springs predictability, while distrust rings it in, limits it, and puts it in the corner. It creates an environment of skepticism, reservations, and dilemmas or zero-sum games. This state of play does not do any good, both to the country's bilateral relations or to regional cooperation and to the overall European integration. The fact that mistrust only ever breeds mistrust is confirmed with the flailing credibility of the Union in the region, especially the credibility of the enlargement process. Setting a target of successfully implementing difficult reforms can have political weight only and only if you are not setting a moving target, but a clear, visible, and tangible one. If you deliver, we will deliver represents the most powerful and perhaps the only fuel that drives the successful European transformation of Balkan societies forward. And I would like here to mention a statement by one of the panelists today who, speaking at a similar panel in which we both participated, said something along these lines. If the carrot symbolizes the benefits or the deliverables which are prized for courageous and difficult reforms, then you are fast moving away with the carrot, losing thus not only the trust of those who have ambitions to fulfill the conditions, but ultimately what you will be left with is the carrot rotting in your hand. From this perspective, there is no dilemma that the disappointment with the failure of the Union to start negotiations is great, not only here, but also in Albania, also having spillover effects on other countries, sending, least to say, unfavorable messages to other neighbors, sucking out the value to undertake courageous, visionary political decisions. We need to be sincere, open, and realistic. We can commend the progress of the region, but the Western Balkans do still need difficult, complex, and courageous decisions. And I believe that you will agree that if not valorized, such solutions lose their power and become counterproductive. Thus, I come to the third topic, and that is the missing puzzle, meaning the Western Balkans as an intrinsic part of Europe, fully integrated in the European Union in the future, being an important link in the chain of political ambitions for Europe united and complete. I say complete because the Balkans have been for long now an internal issue of the Union and part and parcel of the Union processes and policies. Any of the Balkan countries could be a case in point, whether we're talking about Serbia and Montenegro that already are in the negotiating process, or we are talking about North Macedonia and Albania, for which the Union has already adopted a decision to start accession negotiations, or Kosovo and Bosnia, each of them at their pace in the stabilization and association process. Each of these countries can give you data showing the extent to which their social system are linked with the Union. And finally, look at the picture behind. Can anyone really still talk about enlargement when this central part does not change in any way the dimensions of Europe or of the EU? Metaphorically, I see our region, the Western Balkans, as the only island in whole of Europe today, surrounded by the deep blue waters of the EU. It remains an island of its own, somewhere on the EU's map, present and visible, yet unintegrated. This is unfortunately how EU's map appears before our eyes. As paradoxical as it may seem, the Western Balkans today de facto remain an unincorporated island in Europe's heartland. And we do not see ourselves as an island. We see ourselves as part of Europe's mainland, geographically, politically, culturally, and historically. Repeating this thesis for decades, we remain determined to Europe's completion, making our own mark and bringing an added value to the EU, the most successful peace project in human history. Finally, the key important mission of politics is not to create islands, but to build bridges, to reconciliate and link, to serve as the connecting tissue, while inspiring and fostering cohesion. After all, this is the ultimate overarching goal of the European Union and the fundamental values it promotes and to which we are committed. It is in the name of such values that we must remain dedicated and believe strongly in dialogue, mutual understanding and sustainable solution. Therefore, for us, the EU does not have any alternative. Good neighbourly relations too. We will continue the dialogue with the Republic of Bulgaria for this is how the European integration process rolls. Today it is Bulgaria that opposes, tomorrow it will be a different member states that will raise an issue. We need to get used that this process requires engaged, active dialogue, meticulous diplomacy, and for us, an unmatched determination. Here in Ohrid, I would like to reassure you that we will remain determined. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that sobering but realistic speech, Mr. Osmani. And again, thank you very much for organising this and having us here. We're now going to go to our panelists, but our first speaker is Andrei Logar, who is the Foreign Minister of Slovenia, and he's unfortunately not here, but he will be speaking. It's a pre-recorded speech. I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that he, on the 26th of this month, just a few days ago, with his German and Portuguese counterparts, wrote an important piece published on Balkan Insight. EU enlargement is a strategic and shared interest, and I draw your attention to that, where he also draws attention, or they draw attention to what Mr. Osmani was talking about. We are highly concerned that we have not been able to start accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, despite the fact the Council decided to do so already in March 2020. Well, he's not here for me to ask him to continue along that line, but maybe that's what he's going to talk about in his pre-recorded speech. So perhaps we could see Mr. Logar's speech.
Dear Bujar, colleagues and friends, I would like to thank Prespa Forum organizers for the invitation to join you on this very special day, the first day of the second Slovenian presidency of the European Union. This presidency comes at a crucial time, not only for the future of the European Union, but for the future of Europe as a whole. In this context, and not surprisingly, enlargement in relation between EU and countries of the Western Balkans are high on our agenda. Let me stress a couple of principles that will guide us through the presidency as far as the Western Balkans are concerned. Our presidency wants to work towards a credible and secure European Union, capable of ensuring security and stability in its neighbourhood. Within the context, we see the enlargement not as a technical issue, but as a premium geostrategic question. A question that needs passion, ambition and political will of all involved in order to move towards our common goal, a consolidated, strong and resilient Europe. With this in mind, Slovenia hopes that we will be able to jumpstart enlargement process and bring back this symbolism of hope and perspective. After a challenging year marked by pandemics, we could all use a little bit of hope for a fresh start. If Europe wants to be whole and free, then the countries of the region should also be heard at the conference on the future of Europe, another big name and theme of our presidency. After all, this is our collective future where everybody needs to feel as a part of the narrative. This inclusive approach is at the heart of our presidency. Past is marked with missed opportunities and lack of strategic decision regarding the relation between the region and the European Union. While these relations are often, or so it seems, on autopilot, there are other players who understand the geostrategic importance of the region and do not shy away from exerting their influence and their agenda. In this light, promotion and implementation of connectivity agenda is key. EU has given a pledge and allocated 9 billion euros for the implementation of the flagship project in the region. Progress in establishing common regional market is essential in order to achieve alignment with infrastructural, energy and transport corridors of the European Union. While the European Union is here to help, the work must be done by the countries of the region. The same goes with the green agenda and decarbonization policy. But we are here to help and assist. Slovenia would also very much like to highlight the importance of cybersecurity in this highly digitalized world, where hybrid warfare is another tool to destabilize and interfere with the future of Europe. This fits in the overarching presidency theme of crisis preparedness and resilience, which is equally relevant for the Western Balkans. All these need to be discussed at the highest level. This is why we are organizing an EU Western Balkan Summit. It is now up to all of us to make it a success. In closing, as I understand, this is the first edition of Prespa Forum. Slovenia, as the host of the Bled Strategic Forum, knows how difficult it is to organize and sustain such conferences. I therefore wish you all fruitful and interesting debate and good luck. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And of course, I should have mentioned at the beginning that that Mr. Logar was our opening speaker, because of course today Slovenia takes over the presidency of the European Union. I think it's probably no coincidence that our next speaker on my list has been put as number 2 is Olta Jajka, Foreign Minister of Albania. And I suppose it's no coincidence, because clearly the fate of North Macedonia and Albania is very much entwined at the moment. So it's over to you. Do you feel like a hostage, perhaps?
We do. Thank you, Tim. Dear Minister Osmani, dear Buyar, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me first start by thanking our host, Minister Osmani, for the excellent organization of this forum and for his hospitality. It is indeed a very good feeling that we are able to meet in person after a long time when we could see each other only through VTCs and via Zoom calls. The fact that we can meet, the fact that we are meeting and discussing in such a constructive manner are both indicative of the positive developments that are currently taking place in our region. We can finally meet because the pandemic is finally being overcome, we hope, in our region and in the world, and it is indeed a liberating feeling. We are meeting because, as never before in the history of our region, there has been, over the past several years, a consensus on all our parts that we have to work and that we have to talk to each other in order to shape the future of our region together. I strongly believe that although there is still much work to be done, there is currently a positive momentum, despite everything, to our cooperation that if properly exploited, can be of benefit to us all. The Western Balkans are today probably one of the best examples in the world of what can be achieved through sustained multilateral engagement. Think of it for a moment. We are currently talking about connectivity and human exchanges and the 4 freedoms. We are talking about the establishment of a common regional market. We are talking on the creation of the economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans and for the green agenda for the Western Balkans. But if we stop and think of where the Western Balkans were just a couple of decades ago, it feels almost as if we are talking about 2 different regions, doesn't it? Of course, our shared aspiration of Euro-Atlantic integration, I believe, has been crucial to this success. It has provided us with a framework within which our cooperation could take place, but above all, it has provided us with the motivation for our cooperation. NATO membership of most of our countries has radically changed the security architecture of our entire region. The membership of Montenegro and North Macedonia in the alliance has further consolidated the security and stability of the Balkans. The potential membership of Kosovo in the future, or other countries that may wish to join, or at least the deepening of cooperation between these countries and NATO, will undoubtedly have a significant positive effect. If a few decades ago we were a region of conflict and war, no one can deny that we are becoming more and more a factor of stability today. The dream of EU integration, on the other hand, to answer your question, has had an even more transformative effect on every aspect of life in our region. It has defined our policies, it has defined our actions, our reforms. It has been crucial to the development of our institutions and economies, to our modernization and democratization. Indeed, even more than NATO, integration in the European Union has been the most important dream that has united the Western Balkans. But there has been one significant difference between the European Union and NATO in our region. And that difference, unfortunately, has produced consequences for us all. The EU, for understandable reasons, I should say, has been unable to adopt the strategic approach toward the integration of the Western Balkans that has been so central to what NATO has done. This has created opportunities for rival projects to attempt to compete for influence in our region, but it has also risked tarnishing the credibility of the EU among the countries and the people of the Western Balkans. The failure of the General Affairs Council on the 22nd of June to advance the decision on the first intergovernmental conference for Albania and North Macedonia was unfortunately a manifestation of the lack of a strategically driven process on the part of the European Union. I believe that the EU too understands that this kind of approach is not sustainable, and that it is high time for a serious change in how it deals with the Western Balkans. However, I also believe that while the EU works on a new approach towards us, we ourselves, the countries of the Western Balkans, have to carry on regardless, because by now we have become more mature, I think we have become more pragmatic and more constructive enough, I should say, to realize that we have all to gain by working together in order to advance our shared interests. And the good news is that more than ever before, we can agree on an agenda of shared interests. We all agree that advancing the connectivity agenda in all of its dimensions, in transport, in energy, digital, economic, and the human dimension, is to the benefit of us all. As is work on youth policy, on innovation, on research, on education, on culture. We all agree that we need the economic integration of our markets in order to boost growth, jobs, and prosperity, and that we have to work towards the common regional market action plan, the EU economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans, and the green agenda for the Western Balkans, not simply because they will accelerate the phasing in of our economies in the European Union, but first and foremost, because these steps will boost our economies in any case. Of course, I have no illusion that this is going to be easy or even straightforward. There are still issues in our region that need solving. For once, the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo is not going to be easy, but it needs to continue and we all need to support it. But let us not forget that our countries have on more than one occasion shown that they have the courage and the will to make the right decisions. The Ohrid and Prespa agreements, since we are gathered here today, are living proof of how true this is. I believe that we have the momentum, I believe that we have the ability, and I believe that we have the will to advance together, and it will take courage and persistence. But I have no doubt that we have that too, and that if we put our minds To it, future generations will remember the early 21st century as a moment of historic change when our region decided to join forces and work together to guarantee that future. So the question is, how do we do that? The EU integration.
But if you don't answer, that could be quite a long answer.
Absolutely, I'll wrap up. If you want, I could stop and perhaps continue.
Just 2 lines.
Okay. So the question is, how do we do that? The EU integration has been key to the transformation of the Western Balkans, but the EU is obviously lacking the strategic approach that is necessary to make this European dream of ours a credible one and an attainable one, most importantly. So what do we do as countries in the Western Balkans that are stuck and disappointed at this moment in time? The question, I believe, before us is how do we increase the European Union's strategic attention to our region? To some extent, this is already happening because the EU is understanding, first, the damage to its credibility, and second, that vacuums do not exist in geopolitics. So there is some strategic thinking, but it's not enough. On the other hand, it is up to us to work to increase our strategic relevance. So how do we go about that? I think by working together, by investing to transform the Western Balkans 6 or the Western Balkans countries into a continuous space in terms of market, in terms of investment, in terms of economy. It is an idea that many businesses are already adopting, as we were discussing also yesterday with Bujar, that they are not selling our countries, they're not selling Albania, they're not selling Montenegro or even North Macedonia, but they are selling the region. So if you are an IT company, if you are a consultancy or logistics company or whatever, you can only think in terms of economy of scale in order, for our countries and our region to be attractive. And I think that this is where we start to gain the attention of the EU and to keep it. And I'll wrap it in a couple of sentences. So the discussion should be, how do we become a continuous space? What steps do we need to take? Does it remain purely economic, or does it go political too? And roaming through the region is great, but what about customs? What about fees? What about code sharing in logistics? What about infrastructure? So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the good thing is that you, despite everything, you appear to be quite an optimist. I mean, I got an optimistic tone there, but thank you very much. Our next speaker is Matt Palmer, Deputy Assistant Secretary from the US State Department, a very well-known face in this country and in this region. Matt, this morning I heard you give a talk, and as I'm a journalist, obviously I'm always on the lookout for a good quote, and you said, this region is on the cusp of great things. So what are they?
That is an excellent question, Tim. That was actually off the cuff.
Well, now's your chance here to either pull back or explain yourself.
No, thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Thank you all for being here. Thanks again to the organizers of the forum for bringing us all together on this very important topic. I do think that it bears mentioning that the namesakes of both this forum and our present locations are examples of diplomatic success stories. The hard-fought Prespa and Ohrid agreements exemplified the triumph and value of compromise. Leaders took risks to make this happen. And I hope that that will serve as inspiration as we look at other political obstructions that we face and that at times seem intractable. We're here today because we know that diplomacy works. And we can look to other examples throughout the Western Balkans, from the Dayton Accords over 25 years ago to more recent events showcasing the will to come to the negotiating table, including the Washington commitments between Serbia and Kosovo last year and the parties' ongoing participation in the EU-facilitated dialogue with Miro Lajčák's leadership that enjoys strong U.S. support. We should take heart and look to Prespa, look to the friendship treaty between North Macedonia and Bulgaria, and to other success stories as a reminder that victory is possible, that we can move these issues forward. But for diplomacy to work, the conditions for success have to be there. So what are those? There's no one single answer, but in the present case, I might suggest some of the following. The first is the support of the EU and the United States. We believe in the European future for this region, in our support of a Europe whole, free, and at peace, If a country's stated goal is to join the EU and it takes the requisite steps to make its will clear, then the EU and its member states' support must be equally clear and their actions commensurate with the efforts of those countries that aspire to join. The EU member states' decision to open accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania over a year ago was uplifting to the whole region. But now we're at a critical juncture where this promise no longer carries the same degree of credibility, as neither country has been able to take the next necessary steps on their accession paths. So it's critical that the EU stand by its commitments. This means opening accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania without delay. This also means delivering on visa liberalization of Kosovo, 3 years after the Commission first affirmed that Kosovo had completed all the prerequisites. For our part, U.S. support is unwavering. Since the beginning of the Biden administration, we've been active in meeting with the region's leaders to underscore and reaffirm the long-standing U.S. commitment to the Western Balkans and the importance we place on cooperation and coordination with our allies and our partners. The second condition for success is building and maintaining trust. There's no silver bullet here. Trust is built incrementally and must be maintained, and I thought Minister Osmani spoke eloquently about that issue in the keynote. To cultivate this kind of trust, parties need to make earnest efforts to fulfill prior commitments and engage constructively in dialogue. While it's natural to identify points of agreement and points of contention, parties should put forward proposals that they can accept and not simply focus on what they reject. Diplomacy by its very nature requires restraint. But all too often we see inflammatory rhetoric that exacerbates divisions, deepens mistrust, and undermines not only bilateral relationships, but relationships across the region. Leaders should avoid populist and provocative grandstanding. And this is especially true, I would argue, in the era of social media and in the Twitterverse. Twitter is a remarkably effective means of communication, but it can also be either advertently or inadvertently a weapon of mass destruction. A third condition for success is the focus on the long term, recognizing that long-term gains will far outweigh the costs of short-term compromises. To achieve consensus, we cannot allow the best to be the enemy of the good. Perhaps the best example of building regional connectivity is the regional common market, which we discussed at length this morning. A competitive Western Balkans region is one that is attractive to high-quality global investors and regional economic integration, with closer association to the EU single market. This will help the Western Balkans in their accession paths as well. We've seen considerable progress in the area of energy diversification, including transboundary gas connectors such as those connecting Greece and North Macedonia, as well as Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia, which beyond regional integration also provide the additional benefit of reducing reliance on Russian gas. Moving things forward in these areas can provide a compound interest in creating space for future agreements on top of the advances in the political sphere. And while I'm on the subject of energy, very briefly, I think we must also consider environmental protection and sustainability more explicitly. If ever there were issues that affect us all without respect to political boundaries, it's the great environmental challenges of our time, including but not limited to the climate crisis, which I am reminded of sitting underneath these lights. I'm encouraged by the green agenda for the Western Balkans, but now it will take concrete actions to realize the commitments made last November. Air pollution from fine particulate matter separate from carbon dioxide emissions is another serious issue throughout the Western Balkans, one that contributes to people's decisions to leave the countries and take their education and experiences elsewhere. Transnational cooperation on developing clean tech and sustainable solutions is a critical, undervalued space that will boost economies, increase regional connectivity, and directly improve people's health and livelihood. Thanks for your attention today. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you. There's a lot of great things happening in the Balkans, and together, I'm confident we can do even more.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for keeping within the time limit. But it's actually interesting that, in a way, like that we are I mean, although there has been quite a bit of sort of gloom this morning, that we are actually beginning to move into a new era? I mean, obviously we have the same issues of Serbia and Kosovo, as you've said, but the fact is that no one 2 years ago, 3 years ago was talking about, or anyway in this region, was talking about the green agenda, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 5 years ago was talking about the green agenda. Environmental politics were just like not on the agenda. They very much are now, and especially in Bosnia, especially in Albania and elsewhere too. So that's a kind of, perhaps we're on the cusp of something new there, to use your phrase. Great. Okay, well, now I'm going to pass the word to you, Maria Pejcinovic-Buric. You're now Secretary General of the Council of Europe, but you're the former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Croatia, so as rooted in the region as it's possible to get. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Minister Bujani, for this opportunity, and thank you for the beginning of something which is, I think, not only important for the region but for the Europe and beyond, which is taking a PRESPA forum dialogue. Each one of the three is telling PRESPA as emblematic, as you explained, for a very, I would say, historic agreement, forum from ancient times, place where people meet and exchange, and in what form? In dialogue. So it cannot be better to start with that from seeing this and being here from this perspective as from the Council of Europe, that is actually a forum that promotes dialogue since ever it was created since it was created back after the Second World War. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the title of this forum asserts that the Western Balkans are missing puzzle piece without which Europe is incomplete. This is, of course, a nod to the aspiration of those countries to become European Union member states. A perfectly understandable aim. But there is a wider pan-European organization which encompasses almost all European countries, and in which, indeed, Western Balkan countries play a central and vital role. The Council of Europe protects and promotes human rights, democracy, and the rule of law across our 47 member states. Each of those countries has ratified the European Convention on Human Rights, which has the force of law throughout our common legal area. And each is committed, as our statute says, to achieving greater unity between the organization's member states in the pursuit of peace. Peace based upon justice and international cooperation. This is important because dialogue builds trust, trust enables cooperation, and cooperation is the basis for multilateral progress. Inside the Council of Europe, Western Balkan states work with one another and the rest of 47 to address issues of concern to all of Europe and often of particular relevance to the region. Strengthening the independence of the judiciary, fighting corruption and organized crime, strengthening the freedom of media. In recent years, our Commissioner for Human Rights has worked hard on specific issues relating to transnational justice and reconciliation in the Western Balkans, on establishing the fate of missing persons, for example, on protecting war victims' access to justice and reparation, and on fostering inclusive education. Alongside this, national authorities have taken important steps to bring their legislation and practice into line with European and other international standards. There has been regional cooperation on the prosecution of war crimes, laws to prevent discrimination and better protect minority rights, and human rights action plans which contribute to progress in key areas, backed by the Council of Europe's cooperation activities, with a strong field presence. Our organization also carries out confidence-building measures in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This approach supports reconciliation and democratization by enhancing cooperation across the entity boundary line. Today, it involves most of the divided municipalities, and it focuses on cooperation between them, involving young people and strengthening the role of locally elected women. As a result, there are now joint projects by pairs of divided municipalities across the entity line, and 7 female mayors have signed an agreement on intermunicipal city cooperation. So, over 2 decades after the end of conflict, reconciliation is still a work in progress. But that progress is clear and real and must move forwards. Another mechanism that will help that happen is the Council of Europe, EU Horizontal Facility for the Western Balkans and Turkey. Now, in its second phase, it puts an emphasis on the regional dimension of cooperation, and it is important for a specific objective. The Western Balkan countries' aspirations for European Union membership rest on the EU's fundamental first approach to enlargement. Alignment with the Council of Europe standards is therefore a centerpiece of the accession process, with the EU's annual enlargement reports relying on those standards and on our monitoring. And last year in Zagreb, the EU added a specific emphasis on the importance of reforms that ensure the rule of law, democratic values, and a fight against corruption and organized crime. These objectives are at the core of the horizontal facility. So too are anti-discrimination, the protection of rights of vulnerable groups, and freedom of expression, information, and the media. The results are there to see. There has been increased compliance with European standards and the EU acquis in all of these areas, and further progress will surely come. But this, like everything achieved so far, requires the dialogue in which the seeds for progress may be planted. The Council of Europe is proud of its role in facilitating that dialogue and helping the Western Balkans along its path to peace, prosperity, and rightful place in our common European family. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and also thanks for keeping within the time limit. It was very interesting hearing what you were saying, especially about your work in Bosnia, because I have a feeling that it's probably not as well known as it should be, actually. I mean, it's often said that about the EU, that the EU complains that it does a lot, and people don't realize that. And I think probably that's even more the case for you as well. Okay, so now to Miroslav Jenča from Slovakia, and here as Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. So over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to join other panelists in thanking you, Mr. Minister, and the government of North Macedonia for a very warm welcome and excellent organization, what I believe will become a great tradition, Prespa Forum Dialogue. I would like now to convey the message of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who, because of his heavy calendar, cannot be here with us. Here is the message. I send my warmest greetings to the participants in the first Prespa Forum Dialogue. I applaud the people and government of North Macedonia for creating this forum with the aim of building bridges across the region. You are eminently well placed to be mediators and bridge builders. It was on the shores of Lake Prespa that Skopje and Athens signed an agreement 3 years ago, showing that intractable issues can be resolved when there is political will. Leadership by example can pave the way for goodwill gestures that build mutual understanding and trust, the most essential elements to resolve differences. I hope your discussions at the Prespa Forum will be informed by the same determination to create a positive and forward-looking vision for relations in the regions and beyond. We live in an age when divisive rhetoric is used widely to incite mistrust and hatred between communities, undermining peaceful coexistence and social cohesion. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities, creating even greater potential for instability. Positive change depends on dignity, respect, equality, trust, and opportunity for all. This region is incredibly resilient and full of potential. I urge you to put women and young people at the heart of your decision-making, as they can hold the key to fostering sustainable development at all levels. The United Nations accompanied North Macedonia on every step of the road to Prespa. We will continue to offer support across the region as it implements the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. I wish you fruitful discussions and successful first Prespa Forum dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to pass the floor to Kostas Fragogiannis. You're the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece. And I mean, it's kind of interesting. You had 27 years of difficult relationship and conflict, then you had the breakthrough, and then there was a period of euphoria. And now that's over, and it's a kind of normal relationship now, I think. Is it? Okay, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, Minister Osmani, I would like to thank you for your kind invitation to attend this forum in this beautiful part of the world. And I would like to express, together with my gratitude for the invitation, the warmest regards of Foreign Minister Dendias, who unfortunately could not join us today, but nevertheless wishes every success to the inaugural session of the Prespa Forum for Dialogue. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, initiatives such as these that encourage and foster dialogue are always welcomed, particularly in our region that has faced and continues to confront a wide variety of challenges. After all, dialogue, dialogos, as we say in Greek, is the right way to safeguard and promote our interests in the name of peace and to the benefit of all. It is the right way to cultivate mutual understanding and build confidence, the trust that you mentioned earlier, to exchange views and explore synergies, and to resolve differences and promote cooperation in a spirit of good neighborly relations. However, if dialogue is to be effective, if we want it to serve its purpose and allow us to reach our goals, it must be based on basic ground rules respected by all. In the case of dialogue between and among states, these rules are defined by international law. And as EU members or candidate countries, we are also guided by the fundamental principles and values of European acquis. Dear friends and distinguished guests, it was in this very place, almost 3 years ago, that the Prespa Agreement was concluded and signed between our two countries. An agreement reached through dialogue and envisioned by those that engaged in the relevant negotiations at that time. This is an agreement that was made by people, and among these people was Ambassador Dimis Vasilakis, who passed away 3 days ago, and I would like to pay a special tribute to him. The current Greek government made no secret of its disapproval of aspects of the agreement and was obliged to point out its shortcomings. After all, dialogue is also an essential internal process of democracies. It can only contribute to better results that unfortunately cannot be achieved when internal political dialogue is omitted. I believe that as immediate neighbors and friends, we have a responsibility to be honest. And while my government's views are well known and have not changed, we now have a responsibility to ensure that this agreement, no matter the ownership, how and when it was reached, and despite our well-known disagreements on it, is thoroughly implemented in practice by both sides. On the basis of one of the fundamental principles of international law, pacta sunt servanda, or in English, agreements must be kept, there is no question that both parties are now bound by it and must remain committed to its full, consistent, and in good faith implementation. I may be stating the obvious, yet I wish to stress this point, as we should never take such basic points for granted or allow room for exceptions, particularly in light of a number of delays and transgressions in this implementation process that we have observed and of course relayed at all levels to our dear friends in North Macedonia. In this vein, we urge our neighbors, the other party to this agreement, to fully respect this process and deliver consistently on all of our commitments in good faith and on time so that we can look ahead and move forward. This is what we are persistently trying to do. After all, this agreement is meant to signal and provide the foundation for a new chapter in our relations. It is meant to offer a framework in which we can work together in order to broaden and enhance our relations. The agreement has also served North Macedonia's accession to NATO and serves as a roadmap for its European path, a path that Greece has consistently championed for the entire Western Balkans ever since the Thessaloniki summit in 2003. After all, following the transatlantic one, the European integration of this region, the missing piece of the puzzle, as we are calling it here today, is a long-standing strategic goal of my country. It is no secret that we are invested in safeguarding stability and peace and promoting development and sustainable growth in our immediate neighborhood, which we believe is an integral part of Europe, as already has been said. It is also no secret that the merit-based approach of the integration process is a major driver for political, social, and economic transformation. It aims to promote democracy, the rule of law, and respect for fundamental rights. It also prepares the ground for growth by enhancing connectivity and supporting sustainable development. And it calls for the cultivation of good, neighborly relations, and of course respect for international law. We are firm believers that the fulfillment of these prerequisites is ultimately in the interest of the candidates themselves, but also of Europe as a whole. And Greece, the oldest EU and NATO member in the neighborhood, with its valuable know-how and relatable experience, has played and continues to play a vital role in supporting the European path of the region in practice. More recently, we yet again proved our continuous engagement in the region by convening the second Thessaloniki 2020 Ministerial Forum during unprecedented COVID pandemic conditions. This provided the opportunity to focus on coordinating approaches to common challenges, thus highlighting the importance and added value of enhanced cooperation among the Western Balkans and its EU neighbors. Despite the critical situation due to the global health crisis, we have had productive discussions on a good number of important and practical issues affecting us all, such as the lifting of restrictive measures on transnational travel and the Green Lace initiative, which facilitated a cross-border flow of essential goods during the pandemic. I will take 1.5 more minutes.
Okay,
Thank you.
no more.
From our part, we view positively the prospect of contributing to this initiative so that relevant procedures and flows at border crossings with our neighbors are further facilitated. In fact, we believe further cooperation and concerted regional efforts are needed in order to promote economic recovery in this COVID and post-COVID era. It is also necessary to effectively address collective security challenges that we face in the region, such as organized crime, human trafficking, illegal migration, violent extremism, and terrorism. Greece has demonstrated its commitment to principled dialogue and rules-based cooperation with our neighbors through its participation in various regional schemes of cooperation in Southeast Europe, many of which have actually been initiated by my country. In this period, Greece will continue working together with its neighbors for a better future for our region along the aforementioned lines, also during its chairmanship in the office of the Southeast European Cooperation Process, which, as a matter of fact, we assume today for the next 1 year. In closing, I would like to again express my wishes for many productive discussions at this first session of this forum, to extend my gratitude for the kind invitation of yours, and look forward to many more, and I thank you so much for your attention today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, sometimes with ministers and deputy ministers, you need to read between the lines, but that was very clear. There was no need to read between the lines there. Now we're going to go to a pre-recorded tape from Miss Wendy Morton, who is Britain's Secretary of State or Minister of State for Europe or European neighbourhood. And it's a pity that she's not here, because I would have liked to have asked her about this map. As you can see, the missing jigsaw puzzle. We put the yellow piece, and then another piece has disappeared. So, okay, well, over to the tape of Miss Wendy Morton.
Foreign Minister, ministers, guests and friends. I would like to start by congratulating you on hosting this inaugural Prespa Forum for Dialogue, and I'm sorry I can't be with you today. Your lakes carry deep symbolism for security in the Western Balkans. Over 100 years ago, UK soldiers were among those from many different countries who died to preserve peace on the Salonika front around Lake Doiran. In contrast, your lakes now offer reflections of peace. 20 years ago, we backed the Ohrid Framework Agreement, and in 2018, the Prespa Agreement. To that list, we add the Friendship Treaty with Bulgaria a year earlier. All of these agreements have one thing in common. They are regional initiatives, negotiated diligently, with common purpose, to take the bold steps necessary to resolve difficult issues. They are all bright examples of the power of diplomacy, democracy and steadfast support from allies, and above all, of political courage from the leaders who reached these agreements. The Ohrid Framework Agreement has allowed for 2 decades of peace. It was founded on the values of tolerance, inclusion and respect for human rights of all minorities. It showed that there was an alternative to ethnic conflict, and it showed the power of compromise. The Friendship Treaty with Bulgaria was a milestone in signalling how neighbours can restart the process of cooperation and send a strong signal to the region of good neighbourly relations. And the Prespa Agreement, as we all know, helped bring North Macedonia closer to a more secure and prosperous future, at the heart of the Euro-Atlantic community. The UK, the region and the world admire and welcome the courage and determination shown by all who helped negotiate these agreements. They provided the impetus needed for North Macedonia to become a NATO ally at the NATO leaders' meeting in London, and they paved the way for continued Euro-Atlantic integration. At the Western Balkan Summit in London in July 2018, Berlin process leaders celebrated the historic signature of the Prespa Agreement 6 years earlier, as the photos of our then Prime Minister with Prime Minister Zaev and then Greek Prime Minister Tsipras testify. the whole region took heart from this breakthrough and hoped that it might be a harbinger of progress in other irretractable disputes in the region, including a normalisation of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. Sadly, we are not there yet, but it's not for want of trying by EU Special Representative Miroslav Lajčák, who's with us today, whose hard work and patient diplomacy we commend and fully support. The transformation that a Serbia-Kosovo deal would bring about, not only for the people of those countries, but for the whole Western Balkans region, would be immense in terms of future stability and investment. Your population's support for that Euro-Atlantic journey in North Macedonia is undimmed. Despite the challenges to EU accession for North Macedonia and Albania, the UK continues to encourage progress as the key to unlock sustained peace and prosperity in this part of the world. It is what your citizens have voted for. And this is why we invested political and diplomatic effort in negotiating the hard-won joint declaration on good neighbourly relations at the 2018 London Summit, building on the Foreign Minister's pledge made at the Vienna Summit of 2015, in which future Foreign Minister Dimitrov had a strong hand behind the scenes. Your country has shown great leadership in regional cooperation, from which all our countries can learn. The challenge to any agreement is to ensure that its provisions are realised. The experience of the Ohrid framework highlights that full implementation can take time, but it is something that is worth doing, and it is worth doing properly. It's important to take the time to work together, to seek solutions, to maintain progress on implementation, and to build trust and reassurance among all parties. We have been encouraged by this constructive spirit in the past between North Macedonia and Greece and Bulgaria. We encourage all parties to find a way to address bilateral issues in a way that allows progress towards a shared Euro-Atlantic future. The current delay in the holding of North Macedonia's intergovernmental conference is damaging. The longer the wait, and with it the delay to Albania's intergovernmental conference, the greater the risk that its disenchantment with prospects for EU accession will grow. This could be exploited by those who do not share our values or vision for the shared Euro-Atlantic future of this region as a whole. I've been encouraged to see the participation of young people as part of this forum. Implementing these agreements unlocks so many opportunities for them and can be an inspiration about what can be achieved with resolve, goodwill, and a vision for the future, their future. We too are committed to supporting the young, as we showed when we launched a £10 million, 3-year British Council project to bring digital and critical thinking skills to every pupil aged 10 to 14 across the region. We want to help you to develop the entrepreneurs of tomorrow and create an ecosystem where they can access startup capital and flourish. This is how we reverse the brain drain, so that there is a net inflow of skilled young people and investment to tech hubs here in the low-cost, high-talent cities of your own countries. The UK is proud to be a long-standing friend and partner of North Macedonia and the Western Balkan 6 countries and the wider region. By working together, it is a partnership destined to go from strength to strength. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We're now stopping for a coffee break, and then we have another 9 panelists or so. But before any panelists, past and future, can have a coffee, we're going to have the family photo. So, is it over here? Through here? Where is it? The family photo will be outside. Thank you very much, too, and thank you very much for the first half of the panel.